Are oil-backed loans a lifeline or liability for Nigeria? Good morning and welcome to another power-packed episode of Business Week. From Ghana's upbeat growth surprise to China and Turkey reaffirming economic ties, this week's headlines are a reminder that markets and geopolitics never sleep. Oil price jitters are back, with JP Morgan warning of a possible $130 per barrel spike if Iran tensions worsen. Meanwhile, Nigeria's finance ministry is pushing back on reports of a collapsed $5 billion oil-backed loan, and the long-awaited African Credit Rating Agency could finally launch this quarter, offering a new lens on risk. Later in the show, in the deep dive, we will also be chatting with the CEO of Luno Nigeria to explore a different kind of financial frontier, cryptocurrency. With Nigeria rolling out new digital asset laws and its first regulated stablecoin, the big question is whether clear rules can unlock real impact. If you missed the big stories this week, don't worry, we've got you covered. I'm Abby Owolawi. Let's begin with a look at how the markets performed this week, starting with the week-on-week commodities performance as at Friday, the 13th of June. Now, crude futures jumped more than $5 per barrel on Friday after Israel launched airstrikes against Iran, without U.S. support, raising fears amongst investors that the conflict could spread to disrupt oil supplies in the Middle East. Brent crude was up by 10.50% on a weekly basis to $73.48 a barrel, while US WTI crude was at $72.17 a barrel, up by 11.67% from last week, Friday, the 6th of June. We now move to the Nigerian Stock Exchange. At the end of the last weekday of trading, a total of 933.22 million shares in 20,500 deals, corresponding to a market value of 17.95 billion naira, were traded. Now, compared to last Friday's NGX trading day, which was on the 30th of May due to public holidays for the Eid celebrations, yesterday's data showed a 50.88% decline in volume and a 9.90% rise in deals. The current market capitalization of the Nigerian Stock Exchange is 72.78 trillion naira. Let's now take a look at the weekly performance across African markets. Starting in South Africa, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange closing at 95,324.38 there, marking a drop of 1.08% week on week. In Ghana, the stock exchange saw positive movement, with the index rising on a weekly basis by 2.78% and closing at 6,172.13. In Kenya, the Nairobi Stock Exchange closed upward by 8.99%, with the index ending at 147.6. Finally, Morocco's Mazi closing at 18,417.52, down by 0.78% on a weekly basis. To European markets now, stock markets closed in the red after Israel launched airstrikes on Iran. Now, the regional stock 600 dropped by 1.6% on a week-on-week basis, with the German DAX index falling by 3.27% from last week, Friday. France's CAC 40 index dropped by 1.54%, while the UK's FTSE 100 gained 0.14%, and Spain's IBEX 35 retreating by 2.37% there on a weekly basis. Finally, let's take a look at Wall Street as at Friday, June 13th, 2025. With stocks tumbling on Friday after Israel launched a wave of airstrikes on Iran, pushing energy prices higher and adding another complication at the time of heightened geopolitical tensions. Now, the Dow Jones Industrial Average trading at 0.31% lower than last week's Friday, while the S&P 500 rose by 0.40% on a weekly basis. The Nasdaq Composite advancing there by 0.18% week on week. And now for some other top stories from across the world. After 2 days of talks in London, the US and China say they have reached a framework deal to ease trade tensions. Now, at the heart of it, rare earth minerals and magnets. US officials say the agreement, if approved by Presidents Trump and Xi, could resolve export restrictions and renew cooperation. The talks follow a recent call between the two leaders and a fragile truce struck last month in Geneva.
Over the last couple of days, the Chinese and U.S. teams have had in-depth exchanges. Our communication has been very professional, rational, in-depth and candid. The two sides agreed in principle on the framework for implementing the consensus of the two heads of state in their phone call on June 5 as well as the consensus of the meeting in Geneva. The two sides will bring back and report to our respective leaders the outcome of the talks in the meeting as well as the framework that was reached in principle. We hope that the progress we made in this London meeting is conducive to increasing trust between China and the United States. We hope to further promote stable and sound development of China-US trade and economic relations.
I think both sides had extra impetus in order to get things done because we both have our presidents behind us, pushing us to make sure we take care of our respective sides.
U.S. consumer prices rose less than expected in May as President Donald Trump's tariffs had yet to show a significant impact on inflation. The consumer price index rose by 0.1% for the month, putting the annual inflation rate at 2.4%. Economies surveyed by Dow Jones had been looking for respective readings of 0.2% and 2.4%. JP Morgan downplayed geopolitical concerns on Thursday and maintained its base cost forecast for oil prices to stay in the low to mid $60 through 2025 and $60 in 2026, but said certain worst-case scenarios could send price surging to double those levels. However, the analyst drew attention to certain worst-case scenarios where the impact on supply could potentially extend beyond a 2.1 million barrels per day reduction in Iranian oil exports. Now, Turkey and China have renewed a currency swap agreement, allowing their central banks to exchange as much as 189 billion liras over the next 3 years. The deal, which could extend it further, aims to facilitate trade settlements in local currencies and strengthen financial cooperation. The UK economy contracted in April by 0.3% as businesses cut jobs and cancelled investment plans in response to higher taxes and the uncertainty created by Donald Trump's tariff war. Figures from the Office of the National Statistics show that the economy went into reverse after growing by 0.2% in March and by 0.5% in February. The reading, which was the worst monthly drop since October 2023, overshot city economies' expectations of a 0.1% contraction. The African Credit Rating Agency, an initiative set up to provide an alternative to the big three ratings agencies, will be launched by the end of September, according to the African Union. Now, this comes amid a deepening row over Fitch's downgrading of Exim Bank, which has reignited a debate about Western institutions' influence over perceptions of risk around African lending that leads to steep capital costs. Ghana's economy grew faster in the first quarter of the year, driven by growth in the services sector and an agricultural recovery. Gross domestic products in the world's second biggest cocoa producer grew by 5.3% year over year in January to March, the data showed, compared with a revised 4.9% in the same quarter last year. Now, Nigeria's finance ministry has rejected claims regarding the collapse of a potential $5 billion forward sale of crude oil involving the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited. According to a press statement by Mohammed Manga, the ministry's Director of Information and Public Relations, on Wednesday, the statement follows recent media reports that suggest that initiative has failed due to concerns over falling global oil prices and issues surrounding Nigeria's oil supply capacity. The statement noted that while speculation about market transactions is not unusual, the claims that the forward sale has collapsed are unfounded. Executives, regulators, users, and investors in the digital asset space converged in Nigeria for high-level deliberations on the future of the country's digital economy. The event, which had key players in the cryptocurrency and digital assets industry, offered a platform to network, exchange insights, and explore emerging trends shaping the sector. Panels, sessions, and keynote addresses featured some of the industry's leading voices, addressing not only the opportunities in digital finance, but also confronting misconceptions, particularly the common belief that cryptocurrency is a scam.
The state of the digital asset industry in Nigeria today has experienced a significant boom. And indeed, it is important to mention some areas that are currently leading. These areas include the peer-to-peer powerhouse. Nigeria currently leads Africa in peer-to-peer crypto trading volumes, According to Chainalysis 2023 Global Crypto Adoption Index, Nigeria accounted for almost 60 billion in cumulative crypto transactions since 2021, despite limitations in fiat on-ramps and formal exchange infrastructure. This speaks volumes about user determination and the decentralization ethos of play. Whether we like it or not, it has come to stay.
I think Nigeria is almost like the front runner in terms of just how crypto can evolve in terms of use cases. Bitcoin is the first coin that was is the first cryptocurrency in the world, the expectation is that adoption or the usefulness of the coin will be sort of geared or skewed towards Bitcoin. But in Nigeria and in Africa as a whole, we've redefined the use case and the sort of scenarios for crypto. We've now turned the use case into one that is of remittances, because again, Nigeria or Africa really has a huge remittance deficit and gap.
The truth about it is the underlying part of commerce is really tied to money movement, right? And the way we've been seeing money change, the type of money, the format in which money comes, you'll see that it's moving into digital assets, right? Stable coins, for example, using USDT, USDC, and CNGN that just came out. We also see something that there is a new stance on the global stage where some very big banks, right, are beginning to embrace stable coins, cryptocurrency especially. And what this means is that we will see a total shift when it comes to the way people receive money, the way people send money, all right? And what that means is we are breaking barriers, so it's becoming borderless.
Taking South Africa as a case in point, South Africa already has policies and systems in place, right? Not only to track and also measure, but also to facilitate the adoption of cryptocurrency. So I think what Nigeria can do, what we can have, is more of our governmental agencies and licensing agencies as well take up the example of South Africa to adopt cryptocurrency as a mainstay. I mean, we've already had the CBN issue the e-Naira and whatnot, but it doesn't really have like a strong value on the global scale.